So here we are back at the gametes again. And once again, we're still talking about the male reproductive system. So just some quick words in a combining form. So spermatozoa, of course, is our word for sperm. Spermato is the combining form. So once again, we already covered this, but we're just going to review it quickly. Spermatozoa is a mature male sex cell. But here's a new word for you, spermatogenesis, formation of production of sperm, which of course, as we've discussed already, happens in the testicles. Spermatoid is something that resembles sperm but isn't sperm. And spermaturia is sperm in the urine. So for those of you listening to the lecture, you now have a clue on this one, because people often mistake this word for meaning mature sperm. And if you look at the way the word is spelled, it almost looks like it's saying it's mature. But if you look at it from the spermato combining form aspect, you see urea is a suffix. So spermatouria means sperm in the urine. If there's been recent intercourse or ejaculation of some form, that would not be abnormal. However, if that would happen at a time when there hasn't been recent intercourse or ejaculation, it might be a pathology or the indication to a pathology. So it is something that we can check for in the male urinalysis, and we pick it up as protein on the dipstick, because essentially that's what it is. So if we have elevated protein on a male patient, we might think of spermaturia. We might consider that they have a form of kidney disease. That would be the other option if we find protein in the urine. A couple more combining forms. So we had spermato on this previous page, but we also have spermo and spermi. Either of them mean the same, sperm. As in spermicide, there's a spermi form. This is an agent that kills sperm. You'll recall the suffix "cide" means to kill, and spermi, of course, combining form for sperm. And some more words associated, and we're using here the prefix a or an. Aspermia, or aspermatism. This is the inability to secrete or ejaculate semen. So in this case, there is no semen available. There are no sperm, no semen. For some reason, the entire system is dysfunctional, and of course would require the attention of a urologist and maybe a higher degree specialty to kind of figure out why that's the case. In other conditions, or in other situations, you may have the presence of sperm with a very low sperm count. And that's known as oligospermia, or oligospermia. So oligo is going to be the combining form for scanty, and oligospermia, once again, a low sperm count in the semen. So that naturally declines as the male gets older, less sperm is produced. So if it's a 60-year-old male, oligospermia would be considered normal. However, in a 22-year-old, probably considered to be abnormal. So it's one of the things that are looked at when a couple are trying to conceive a child. The easiest thing to check is first the sperm count in the male, before they start getting into the more extensive testing that would go into the female end of things. So oligospermia is often found to be the reason. Doesn't mean a baby can't be made. It just means it might take a little bit more effort. Semen. This is a thick whitish liquid released from the penis during sexual intercourse that contains sperm and other secretions. The other secretions come from a couple places. One's the prostate gland, helps produce liquid that's a lubricant that helps sperm along its way in order to get through the external and internal os of the uterus and to fertilize an egg. And there's another gland we'll learn about called the Bartholin gland that also contributes to that fluid. So the semen itself is coming from those two organs, and that's the whitish liquid. The sperm is contained within it, and that's coming from the testicle. So during ejaculation, the sperm rise from the testicle through the vas deferens to the prostate. They combine with the Bartholin glands and the prostate, which secrete this fluid, and that in itself is semen. The idea of the semen is not only to lubricate the vaginal canal, allow the sperm to get through, but the vaginal canal also is a very acidic environment, and it can kill sperm very easily. Semen's very alkaline, so it's trying to preserve the sperm. So it's kind of, in a way, a natural form of birth control, although not a reliable one. If it truly were birth control, the human race wouldn't be here. So it's not anything to rely on, but it's something to be aware of. Vaginal environment's more acidic, and semen coming out is more alkaline. So they kind of hopefully balance each other out. And of course, we couldn't finish the discussion without getting sort of to the end of the tract in terms of anatomy, and that's the penis. It's the male sex organ that transports sperm into the female vagina, and here we see it. and we have different structures associated with it. We haven't got to these yet, or well, some of them anyway, but I want to point them out now. We have the urinary bladder, you can see here at the top of the diagram, and directly beneath that we have the prostate gland. And do note that there are some vessels that come through the bladder and around the bladder, and they intersect back at the prostate gland. That's going to be significant later when we talk about some pathologies. Bulbal urethral glands, or the Cowper glands. These are glands with ducts that open into the urethra and secrete a mucus-like substance that acts as a lubricant during sexual stimulation. I just realized earlier I called these Bartholin glands, and I misspoke on that one. I do stand corrected. They are bulbal urethral glands, or Cowper glands. They're located in the male and the female anatomy. These are glands with ducts, and they open into the urethra in the male anatomy, and they secrete a mucus-like substance, a mucoid, that acts as a lubricant during sexual stimulation. So we talked about the prostate and other glands sort of creating the slippery fluid that consists, that results in semen. The bulbal urethral glands, or otherwise known as the Cowper glands, are important with that. They secrete a mucoid, which means resembling mucus. And here we also have their location. You can see they're just inferior to the prostate gland. Once again, if you see that prostatic urethra right there, that organ around it is the prostate. And so it completely surrounds the urethra. Once again, that's going to be important in the pathology a little bit later in the lecture. So we're going to cover the general aspects of sexual reproduction between male and female. Want to point out here that we know that not all sexual activity happens between male and female. When we refer to intercourse in this lecture, we are referring to male and female because that's the only combination that can produce a child. So many of the references will be referring to intercourse or forms of sexual intimacy that are between male and female, but just to be aware, we know that it's not limited to that. These terms are pretty wide open, at least the first one: libido, sexual urge or desire. And that simply describes that. It's a different level for everyone. It kind of depends on all sorts of things that come into formation as an individual reaches sexual maturation. There are, stories and myths that there are foods that will increase the libido or sexual desire. Some of them are listed here. There's no scientific evidence that any of these things have anything to do with libido. Libido is one of those mysteries of the brain that we know a lot about, but don't really know the origin or really what drives it. It's just one of those things that is part of the human experience, probably part of the mammal experience. If you think about it, reproduction going through the whole mammalian kingdom, if you will. So I don't know if animals have libido. I'm guessing they probably do. Coitus, however, is something that happens in the animal kingdom, and it happens with humans also. Coitus is the sexual intercourse between a male and female. We have a depiction of it here. Once again, we know that there's different variations. When we refer to coitus, we're talking about an act that could result in a pregnancy. And on that topic of sexual variety in life, we have the prefixes hetero and homo. These are terms you know well. Heterosexual, person who's attracted to people of the opposite sex. Homosexual, person who's attracted to people of the same sex. For most of my life, and there's less of it now than there used to be, but when I was much younger, there was a whole big wall between these two worlds that didn't need to exist. In my lifetime, I've seen that wall come down, where we start to realize, what people do in their intimate lives is what they do. It has nothing to do with who they are as people or how we should view them in society. And I'm really happy to see that. In fact, the generation that many of you are part of are part of that movement. And I just think it's very rewarding for people who had to live by social mores that didn't really fit who they were for most of their lives. And many people have suffered that over the centuries, to be honest. And we're now in a more enlightened age where we're less focused on what one does with their intimate life and more focused on who you are as a person. For myself, I know it's who you are, not what you do in your private time. And a couple more terms associated with this. We have bi, meaning to, and a, meaning without. So bisexual, I know you're familiar with this already, as a person who's attracted to both sexes. Now it does say here, having both male and female reproductive organs. I want you to just ignore that. I can't delete it from the slide because it won't allow me to, but it's not the definition we're concerned with. We're sticking with the first one, bisexual, person who's attracted to both sexes. And as well with asexual, meaning non-sexual. Some people just have no interest in it for whatever reason, and they have their own flag, the asexual pride flag. And so I think that's kind of cool. We've depicted it here. Bisexuality is sort of depicted in that diagram in the upper right corner. So once again, asexual, not sexual, or not interested in it. Having no sex organs technically could describe asexual. That is not a definition we're interested in using. So with each of these, just take the one directly under the word and ignore the secondary definition. It's not relevant to our class, nor are they really the way these words are used. Okay, so big part of reproduction, orgasm, ejaculation, can happen in either gender, but we're talking about the male gender right now. So orgasm is the highest point or climax of sexual stimulation. That's true for either gender. Ejaculation, the ejection of semen from the penis at the time of male orgasm. Ejaculation is normally associated with the male gender. And of course, we have an interesting little scientific tidbit here for those of you who are curious. When a male honeybee has an orgasm, his genitals explode and he dies shortly thereafter. Mr. Fox seems to be very interested in that sort of detail, and I guess that means as far as honeybees go, partner selection is pretty darn important because it's going to be one and one only. Erectile dysfunction, so impotence. This is the inability of a man to achieve or maintain an erection long enough to engage in sexual intercourse. There are a couple of groups of tissue that exist within the penis, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. I'll have a diagram that will show you what I'm talking about, and these fill with blood during stimulation, and when there's an inability for the blood to flow into that tissue to cause the erection, it's called erectile dysfunction, and the definition is right here. Impotence, once again, is used not as much as it used to be, but it's definitely a word that we recognize to describe erectile dysfunction. Infertility. This is the inability to conceive a child after trying for at least 1 year. I've seen this diagnosis many, many times with people who eventually had a child. So I've always taken issue with this, but I don't write the definitions for diagnoses. I just deliver information to you. So infertility, the inability to conceive a child after trying for at least a year. Oligospermia might be the cause, and if that's the case, it might take 2 or 3 years for conception to happen, but it's still possible. Aspermia, of course, would indicate that infertility is likely a permanent or chronic condition for that patient who may be diagnosed with it. So one way that we can prevent pregnancy, if that's not the intended outcome of an interaction, and of course we always want to take precautions if we don't want to produce a life, if that's not where we are and that's not what we want to do, we want to take precautions against it. Having a child at the wrong time in life could be less than a positive thing in some cases, although having a child generally is very positive. Condoms. These are thin sheaths worn over the penis during sexual intercourse. They are considered to be contraceptives. I'm going to tell you right now, they are not that reliable. You probably already know that. They have about a 20 to 30% failure rate. They very much are protection against sexually transmitted diseases. So in my lexicon of sort of, sexual terms or whatever, when we refer to condoms, it's more about disease prevention than it is pregnancy prevention. Every doctor I've ever worked with has said condoms are fine, but there has to be a backup method, as in oral birth control or some other form of spermicide, so that the condom is more efficient. So not really a great contraceptive, but useful to, once again, prevent transmission of certain diseases. 15-minute mark. I'll pause it here. I'll be back in just one moment.